All righty, folks, welcome back. And you're in for a treat today. You really are. I've got to know this gentleman we're going to talk to a little bit named Pat Shannan. Some months ago, had him on a radio show at least once, maybe twice. He spoke with us here one time before at Bible study. He's fun to talk to. He has a great sense of humor. He has to put up with us, I reckon. But we're going to talk about a lot of things today. We're going to talk about some things that I'd say very few pastors ever bring up, as far as deception in our own government, maybe in our public school systems, and a whole lot more than that. We're going to discuss very quickly. I want to just share with you the 10 planks of Communist Manifesto and show you how they have been fulfilled to the T. And when this was written, it's been much more since then. But most churches won't share this with you. I don't know what they teach in most churches anymore. I don't go to them. I'm not invited to them. In fact, I've been run out of them. But anyway, before we get started, I'll read one verse to you to prove the point of what is happening to a nation that puts a faith in man and turns their back on God. And of course, Psalm 9:17 says what happens there, you turn into hell. But Jeremiah 17:5, a verse I've quoted many, many, many times, and it applies more today than it did when I first quoted it 25 years ago. I can quote it by memory, but I'm going to read it just to make sure we get it right. Jeremiah 17:5 says, "Thus saith the Lord, Yahweh." L-O-R-D, all capital means Yahweh, Y-H-V-H. "Cursed be the man that puts his trust, that trusteth in man. Cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departed from the Lord." Again, Yahweh. Now let me say this, and make it clear. And people that trust in man to take care of them, house them, clothe them, feed them, nurse them from womb to the tomb, is cursed. Period. And we make flesh our strength. We trust in man's welfare powers, or their financial structures, or their militaries. You trust them, and you destroy yourself because your heart departs from God. I didn't write that book. It's in there when I read it. Y'all agree with that? Is that what your book says too?
Says it right here.
It says right there. So we're going to get into some discussion on Pat Shannan. And Pat Shannan, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. I appreciate it.
Where'd he go? Yeah. Oh, there he is.
All right, yes. I'm always glad to rap with you, Butch, Pastor Butch.
Come right on in, enjoy yourself, and make yourself at home. There's not many of us here. Some people watching us online, and I want you to, as you know, make yourself well known, and people who you are, tell the truth like you always do, and enjoy yourself here today. We're going to cover a lot of things, but let's do our best to get out before the people some things that we have been duped into believing in our lifetimes, and even beyond our lifetimes, that's changed this nation for the worse. I'm going to let you get started. What do you want to start off with in your own mind? What's preeminent in your mind today?
Well, the last couple of weeks I've been completing a long magazine article for the Barnes Review, and it's they asked me to do a piece on the Oklahoma City bombing, but not so much the actual bombing, but the cover-up and the aftermath and the threats and intimidation and everything else that went on since then. And as I began to go through, my research and some of the documents, I began to realize that over the past 24 years, I think I've forgotten more about the Oklahoma City bombing than the millennials will ever be allowed to know.
Amen. Yes.
And so I re-entered, because you may have seen our video we did on that way back in '95. I think it was probably the first documentary video to come out on the subject in October of '95. And of course the bombing was April 19th, so we moved out pretty fast. And as I was rewatching that the other day, I said, "Doggone, we did pretty well for only 6 months education on the subject," and what has turned up since. But I want to read you a piece here, because what you just mentioned the first 5 minutes, I think no incident depicts it better than what a colleague, Gavin Phillips, wrote, the Oklahoma City bombing, Searching for the Truth. He came out with this maybe 5 years or so after the fact. But he said the Oklahoma City bombing is one of the most significant events of the 20th century, for three reasons. Firstly, because the evidence proves that the U.S. government is intricately involved in every aspect of this event, from the genesis through the ensuing cover-up. Secondly, it stands as bold and blatant testimony that massive government conspiracies can and are successfully orchestrated. And thirdly, to identify and analyze the machinations of how this particular place of government fiction was produced and accepted as fact by the majority of Americans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I said a long time ago that the word conspiracy theorist was dreamt up by what we know now as the deep state boys at CIA, I imagine, back in the mid-'60s after the Warren Commission came out with the Omission came out with their ridiculous report on the Kennedy assassination. And so many of us were just outraged, gradually more and more every year by the baloney that people were being fed. But, it's amazing with the power of the legal tender dollar, which gives them the power not only over the press, but now we're learning law enforcement. I mean, the revelations of has gone on with Jim Comey and the rest of the FBI in recent years. We saw all that 20-odd years ago in Oklahoma City.
Yes.
But we had no idea. I thought I knew a lot. I had no idea for the last couple of years how deep this evil is entrenched in the U.S. government. We're an evil government. We're controlled by Satan. God's still in charge of the big picture, but by golly, Satan's in charge of the earth and certainly the U.S. government.
Absolutely.
And maybe we're going to see some action here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm not a prophet of any kind, but I do like to study scriptures, current events, and history. And if I'm looking at it right, we're going to be in another civil war. And I use the word civil war, that's the only thing I think I'm making a match, but it's not going to be the same kind of civil war. It's not going to be nearly as equal in terms, perhaps, as far as fighting men goes, because there'll be very few people that know what we know they're willing to stand. As I said during the Bible study, if they confiscate guns, 90% of those who say they won't give them up will give them up. I know that from
Well, I don't
personal
know if it's as high as 90, but I agree with you. More than half are. Well, I agree.
Well, I mean, it's easy to talk a good talk, but when it comes right down to the nitty gritty, a lot of people are going to back up. You know that.
Sure. Well, the Americans, especially Christian Americans, don't understand their enemy.
No, they don't.
The tactics that these boys stoop to, I saw it in Oklahoma City over the years. I mean, not just in April of '95. I'm talking about that for the next decade. I'll give you an example, and this is what goes on now, I understand, in D.C. all the time. I used to say, and I think it was true 20, 30 years ago, that we couldn't understand why a good Christian, non-lawyer, businessman would get elected to Congress and good conservative, and he goes up there, and 6 months later you can hardly recognize his voting record. What happened to him? Well, the answer was, with the power of the printing press and the money press, they go and they drop $250,000, $500,000 on the guy's desk, and they bought him. Mm-hmm. Now that works on many, I should say, but there's a few that it won't work on. You remember George Hansen and Larry McDonald, and these people became a real thorn in the side, and so they had to take more drastic attention. And another tactic is over at the local hotel where so many Republican and Democratic parties are being held, cocktail parties. And so one of these guys who hasn't been behaving properly, one of the new rookie congressmen, and he's a little bit too conservative with his voting, he shows up down there and has a couple of snorts, and somebody slips a Mickey in his drink. And upstairs, he's led to a room, and they call his wife, and they say, well, John had a little bit too much tonight. He'll be home tomorrow. Okay, thank you. And tomorrow, John wakes up in bed with a 12-year-old boy, and the cameras are rolling. And they go in and they show that video to John in his office on Monday. They say, well, I guess we know how you're going to vote on the so-and-so bill on Thursday. don't we, Congressman? You sure do. Now that's a tactic that Christian Americans cannot understand. They can't grasp that.
Well, how long have we been trained from our youth on up that America is good, all other nations are bad? Russia bad, America good, and rah rah rah, America red, white, and blue. How long have we been taught that to that we believe them no matter what we do, we're right. That is the arrogancy of America today as a whole. And Phil wants to say something. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, Butch, ask him if he'll turn that lamp on in the back, because that might help if he turns that lamp on.
Okay, he's going to do it right now.
He heard you.
He's going to turn it right now. Y'all can see, folks, got a little glare in his face. He got a window too far and can't get the glare off his face. But
Tell him to turn that lamp on that's back there on that counter.
he got it.
No, he didn't turn it on.
Yeah.
Is the lamp on?
The lamp in the back, behind you.
Is the lamp on?
You see it?
No,
there's
the
another
one
lamp.
behind you.
There's one on the counter.
One on further behind you there on the shelf.
That one you
behind
can turn
you.
off.
Okay.
Yeah, turn that on. We'll wait on you.
All right.
We'll stay right here.
Going in the back wall.
Because
But-
what it's doing is adjusting for that dark background, see?
If any people in the world have been thoroughly brainwashed, it's Americans, Phil.
Right.
Is that not true?
Right.
Can you wait till 6 o'clock?
Wait till it gets dark.
Okay, we're trying to get him set up here, folks. Just bear with us. This is we haven't done this very often. Is
I
that
think
better?
I think that might help. We'll
Might
see.
help. We'll see. Okay.
It's pulling the light back.
All right. Now we'll see what happens.
Does that help any?
No, made it worse.
No, that made it worse.
You made it worse.
Made it
Oh
worse.
man,
Sorry, Pat. It made it worse.
All right.
Sorry about that. But anyway, I can sit back down. We got more to talk about. If you will call and making comments, by the way, the lines are open. We love the phone calls. We know you're out there, and that's encouraged to keep on going here.
have him sit back there.
I do want to share why he's getting rescheduled here, reset here. The Communist Manifesto, the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, I'm going to share with you. I'm going to show it very quickly. It won't take long, about 3-4 minutes, then I'll go back to Pat, share some more with you. Now, I want you to listen to what I'm reading here. These were written back in 1848. I want you to see how much they have come to fruition and actually surpassed what they planned when Karl Marx wrote these in 1848. Abolition of private property in land and of application of all rents of land to public purpose. The courts have interpreted the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, 1868, by the way. That's when the nation finally went down after we lost the Second War for Independence, to give the government far more eminent domain power than was originally intended on the rubric of eminent domain on various zoning regulations. Land use regulations by the Bureau of Land Management, property taxes, that's a biggie, property taxes. There is no private property. If you don't pay your taxes, you don't own that property. You don't own it anyway. Is that true?
Yeah.
And environmental excuses, private property rights have become very diluted, and private property and lands and vehicles and other forms are seized almost every day in this country under the forfeiture provisions of the RICO statutes and the so-called war on drugs. We'll cover 2 more of these. A heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax. Ever heard of that?
Yep.
The 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, 1913, which some scholars maintain was never properly ratified, and various state income taxes established in this major Marxist coup in the United States many decades ago. These taxes continue to drain the lifeblood out of the American economy and greatly reduce the accumulation of desperately needed capital for future growth, business starts, job creation, and salary increases. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. They had the power now, of course, to tax your inheritance and control that. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. And a rebel can be somebody, and this has happened in many places, driving down the highway, cop pull them over, they got too much cash in their possession, take the cash, take the car, put the guy in jail. That's true. Centralization of the credit in the hands of the state, which has been done by the Federal Reserve Act 1913. Centralization of communications, transportation in the hands of the state, which has been done through the FCC and other places. Extension of factories as instruments of production. We know that the collective farms are taking over. The Department of Labor, the Department of Agriculture are all running those now. They're not independent. Farmers depend upon handouts to survive by the federal government. Am I telling the truth?
Yes.
Yep.
equal obligation of all to work, establishment of industrial armies, especially for the agriculture. And since this passage went into effect, started, they now have the equal rights for women, which means women will be drafted, and that's already been talked about right now. So we see it all come together. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. They want to bring it all together under zoning. You ever heard of the 10 regions of the country? Zoning. Do you know they're talking about putting our state, West Virginia, into zones and not counties?
FEMA regions.
That's being discussed right now. Free education for all children in government schools, abolition of children's factory labor as was them, combination of education and with industrial production. In other words, public schools are put together to teach the children how to follow the government's rules and how to be productive citizens. Don't ask any questions, just follow the rules. That's what public schools were invented for, and they've done very well. Those are 10 planks, the Communist Manifesto written in 1848. Which one of them has not been fulfilled?
Right. Let's ask one more thing. Ask him if he can pull the camera or the computer closer to him, as close as he can.
Okay. Phil wants you to pull the computer as close to you as you can.
Well, that's where the bright light's coming from, the screen.
Well, but we need, if it,
Can he tip his
Phil's
screen?
doing the best to get your face so pretty, Pat.
If we can tip
good
the
luck with
screen, yeah, if we can tip the screen, that might help too.
So anyway, we'll move on from there, but we're doing the best we can. Now, we just discussed some things here. I think they're hugely important. We are now a socialist nation, are we not?
Yes.
Still there, Pat?
Oh, I thought you were talking to the gang. They were
Well, everybody, but you specifically, are we not now a socialist nation?
Yeah, of course we are. And hey, I think we're beyond it. I think it's much closer to communist.
I agree. But looking back over history in my lifetime and before, how many wars were we tricked into for the sake of the elite and our government to profit from these wars?
All of them.
There you go. Now reiterate that and tell us what you mean.
Well, imagine the absurdity of Christians in the North being motivated to going down south and shooting Christian brothers to the tune of 630,000
Yes.
that die. Now, who could pull that off? How could that happen? Well, it's absurd, but the enemy got it done, and the agents of Satan, I call them Satan's chosen people, funded both sides. The Rothschilds funded both sides in that war. And then as we move forward, we find out they have usually funded both sides in almost every war.
Every war. Yes.
And-
Well, you know, right after that, wasn't too long, we went into the Spanish-American War. We were caught into that war also, were we not?
Oh yeah, that I'm not sure of the historical details of that, except the sabotage of the battleship Maine apparently was an accident to start with, but they were able to portray it as a sabotage and etc. As you know, so many of these things have happened. We can't, with all the fake news, and of course more fake news is being exposed now than ever before. Almost everything we know about history and especially the wars is a lie.
It is.
You know, Franklin Roosevelt, as you know, he actually forced the Japanese into attacking us by cutting off their oil in the Pacific.
Now, folks, do you hear that? This is important. The Japanese did not want to attack America. Now, they said so themselves. But they attacked us because we cut off their oil supply to their little island state. Go ahead, Pat.
And furthermore, speaking of that, you just reminded me, but one of the Japanese generals was later quoted when asked, because the west coast of California, Oregon, and Washington were in December 1 and 42 of the Japanese coming in to the west coast and invading. And after all, what they had done in Hawaii was pretty outrageous. And later one of the generals was quoted as saying, "We didn't come because we knew the American people were armed."
That's right. There'd be a gun behind every blade of grass, he said.
They caught anybody who brought up that suggestion in Japan got vetoed right away with that piece of information. Also, most people don't understand, or have never been allowed to read and understand, that, speaking of being funding both sides of the war, Hitler was funded by the New York banksters.
That's right.
And
He was.
Who makes the most off of wars? Well, of course, the ones who fund it. You and I were discussing the other day, and I was been very much up on this for some time. But August the 3rd, I believe it was, in 1964, is when they faked that attack at the Gulf of Tonkin and to get us into Vietnam.
And I want to say this very quickly before y'all think we're completely off a rocker. This has been on the History Channel, and I've watched this. Been said that we were tricked in World War I, that the Pearl Harbor was planned or knew about in advance. The Gulf of Tonkin. This is on the History Channel, so it's not hidden. But who watches it and who really cares? And if they were doing this 100 years ago, how much worse is it today? People, please think. I know that's a lost art, and your brain's rusty. Oil up a little bit and get the gears turning. And think about this. If they were doing this and deceiving us back 150 years ago, how much worse is it today? And how much more dumbed down are we today than they were back then? Go ahead, Pat.
Well, you remind me again, that's what Joe Stalin said the first time. It was around 1938 or 9, as I remember. He had his first glimpse of experimental television. And he was blown away. He said, wow, what a tool.
Yeah.
And boy, we see that tool being used today. Back in the 50s, when television became popular, we didn't get our first one until 1957, and my dad wouldn't fool with it until cable TV got to town, so he could get decent reception. We lived 135 miles from Memphis and 100 miles from Jackson, so an antenna wasn't worth much in those days. So, but black and white TV, and I understand this was all done by design, was very, very entertaining. The comics were clean and funnier than they ever are today.
Yes.
And the shows were wholesome. The family show, Ozzie and Harriet, and you remember them, the younger audience.
Father Knows Best,
Little Rascals,
and all those. But I remember all those.
Very wholesome TV shows and entertaining, and actually it was still family time. It was a time when mom and dad and the kids would sit around the TV set. Now, the smart moms and dads tell the kids, don't even watch your doggone TV anymore. Stay away from it. It'll poison you. And many parents that I know, I've got a couple of friends who don't even have a TV in the house. That's how serious they are.
Well, Phil doesn't have one either, by the way. So, amen to him.
Okay, there you go.
But but all this deception, it didn't happen overnight, did it?
Oh no, it happened. Well, I think one of the big jumps was the civil rights movement in the '60s, and then suddenly we saw the black comics coming on, and their filth was later spread in the '70s. That was one of the big beginners, I guess. And I don't know, it got so easy for them. Hey, you remember 1939, Gone with the Wind?
Oh, yeah.
And at the end of the line, people were aghast when Clark Gable said, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Yep. I remember that.
Can you imagine?
But how they brought even in sexual perversion, homosexuality, lesbianism, right into it. You remember the black comedian played Geraldine, what was his name? Flip Wilson. Remember he dressed up like a woman, and so did the older guy, Merrill did that before him, dressed like a woman, and everyone thought it was funny. And it was, in a sense, that we still had innocent minds back then. But over a period of time, they brought this in till it become, it was comedy, so guys used to seeing it, we laughed about it, but they brought it in so gradually. I remember back when I was in the Air Force, I think I was in Creek Grease at the time, they had a movie and had one guy in there was a homosexual, and him and his partner were so happy they lived together. But we all shrugged it off because it wasn't going to happen. It was just a movie, right? The guys used to see that on movies and entertainment, and now it's in the streets having homosexual pride parades. Yeah. So they brought it in so gradually through what we call entertainment, and we were so stupid we never saw the future of that. Here we are.
I was reading your chapter on that in your book just this morning, matter of fact, and about the gays And you reminded me of a piece I wrote, I don't know, 10 years ago or more, apologizing for being gay. I used to be a gay man, and I went on and admitted that. But that was when gay meant happy and glad to be here. And I can't be gay anymore because they have distorted the definition of my word.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
On that subject, a year ago, I would say now, I listened to Rush Limbaugh and Hannity in the afternoons when I'm out in the car going to the post office or something. Otherwise, I don't bother with the radio. And those two guys are still pretty good. They know what they can't talk about if they want to keep their butts in those chairs. And, such as the real government frauds like the birth certificate and this sort of stuff. They won't touch that. If you want to get cut off the air right fast, call Rush or Hannity someday and ask him about the fraud in the birth certificate with Obama and watch how fast they dump you. Anyway, so about a year ago, I was out and Rush had this woman on who was a super liberal lesbian from New York City, but she was very articulate, very well spoken. And so he let her on. He left her on, I'd say for, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, because she was rambling on intelligently about the movement. Of course, she was on the other side from where you and I are, and Rush, of course. But she went on to say, she said, Rush, do you want to know the fact of how we really grabbed a toehold over you guys? And he said, yes, absolutely. She says, that was when we convinced you to start using our word, gay.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. That's when we got the upper hand on you.
Yep. And that started back in the big time back in the 80s and 90s. I didn't know back then, but I do now. That's why I won't use it for anything but what it really means. But that was a subtle change that I hear Christians use today when they refer to homosexuals, sodomites, and lesbians gay. And I hate it when I hear a preacher say that. I correct them immediately right on the spot. Some get offended, but I don't care. The word gay does not mean sexual pervert.
Well, I correct them too. I don't have that much contact with the preachers who say it, but certainly friends and neighbors, and even my wife. And she does down in Texas. It's ingrained. It's ingrained. But I say, no, you mean sodomite. I'll say it every time. No, you mean sodomite. Ain't nothing gay about them. In fact, I think
right. Exactly right. But you read in the book I wrote too, the chapter on patriotic idolatry. If we don't get that far or not, I don't know. Patriotic idolatry. We now have become a people that worship the nation, the flag, the president, or whatever. We no longer worship Almighty God. We have other things above Him. And when you stand and pledge your allegiance to a nation that slaughters innocent children in a womb, promotes sodomy, and cause unjust wars, when you pledge your allegiance to them before God or exempt God from it, you have committed idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did read that. That's earlier in the book. In fact, that was a month or so ago. I'm reading it slowly, but I enjoy reading it in one chapter at a time. I enjoy your writing because you're brief. It's easy to read your book when I feel like it. I'm not getting wrapped up in some novel story. I'm getting wrapped up in some great information and education.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I'll have the second volume out here pretty soon, by the way.
Say that again. I interrupted you.
I'll have the second volume out here pretty soon.
Okay.
Hopefully a month or two.
Talking about what you just brought up, I have a few neighbors around here. Of course, they got the American flag out all the time. And suddenly, one day, my new neighbor across the street stuck his out there after having the University of Kentucky out there, which I couldn't tolerate. And he put up his American flag. Well, I couldn't wait to dig him a little bit. I said, what you doing hanging that occupational flag here in the Confederacy?
What was his answer?
Yeah.
What was his answer?
He didn't appreciate it. He's got what... Oh, these people have what I call red, white, and blue fever.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what you mentioned a while ago with World War II. I had somebody get mad at me. It's been probably in the 80s, and because he had fought in World War II, and I was telling him some of the stuff that goes on in Washington, D.C. He actually got angry with me because he had such a galloping case of red, white, and blue fever. I fought in World War II. I fought for this country. I said, no, you didn't, Charlie. You didn't fight for this country. You fought for a government
Yes, he did.
You didn't know what you were fighting for, but I don't think he ever spoke to me again.
Well, my dad was World War II veteran, wounded and prisoner of war. Several years ago, he finally caught on to how he was tricked into this too, and it really bothered him. You know, it really did, because he lost friends over there, like I did in Nam and different places.
That's when you would have a military funeral.
And he would not have a military funeral, and I was glad to hear that. You know, and I'm saying this humbly, and I hope it don't. If I offend somebody, I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. I'm a veteran, so I didn't run and hide. Although I think sometimes I've been wiser if I would have, because but I didn't know. I had this red, white, and blue fever too back then, and I went in thinking I was going to overseas to protect my country and fight communism, and that's what I really thought. And because our side was there doing things, we were good guys. I remember this. I've seen this with my own eyes. We were in Thailand, packing heroin in body bags and shipping it out there in C-130s. But now we were the good guys. We were doing it for the right reason. That's how naive. That's why they take 18-year-olds. They don't know their tail from the hole in the ground. And that's why they do this. But now I look back now, Pat, and I get angry because I was so easily deceived. I know in a sense it wasn't my fault, but in another sense it was. But I have problems today overcoming the feelings I have about this. I get angry. That's why I never went to Washington, D.C. to see the Vietnam Wall. I'll probably get angry. I'll probably cry. Who knows what I'll do. I lost people I went to school with over there. And for what reason? Why do we got to show for what we did in Vietnam in a way of helping anybody except the ones, the heroin addicts, line their pockets with money, the elite. Mm-hmm. Now we're doing the same thing in Afghanistan. Why in the name of God can we see this? And I say this again humbly, but I say it straight out. I don't like to hear somebody tell me thank you for your service.
Yeah.
I want to tell you what, I'm going to say this bluntly. They call us heroes. No, we weren't heroes. We went over there because we had to. We did our job, maybe somewhat. We would come back. A hero, we put on a uniform, we would have done that. And I'm saying this again, and people get mad, that's all right. We call cops heroes, firemen heroes. They volunteered for that job. They won that job, didn't they? They get paid for it. That's their job. Maybe they do something great, and they should. But they're not heroes. They're doing what they signed up to do.
And they're getting paid.
A hero, somebody does something out of the ordinary without having a uniform or say, I need to do it because I'm getting paid for it. They do it at the risk of their own life with no benefits at all offered to them. That's a hero.
Well, they dumb it down or lower the. Well, for instance, you would not put your flag at half-mast unless it was head of state.
You're right, exactly.
Now it's all the way down to the bus stop.
It is. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. You let Phil know that the video feed keeps breaking up. We keep stopping and starting.
Video feed is breaking up. I'll let him know. Appreciate it. Thanks for calling and telling us that, Kevin.
That's not all.
Okay.
I want to tell people what this man has so brilliantly brought up about black and white productions done by Stalin. And I want to let people know you can go to a YouTube movie called The Circus, 1936. That is 1936. The Circus, 1936 on YouTube. Look it up. It's the most profound propaganda piece, one of the best that Stalin did. And it was showing how he wanted to start race wars in the United States and how the Soviet Union were so receptive to black people. And at the same time, he was murdering all the Polacks, all the Ukrainians by the millions. And so the hypocrisy, but for sure losing your feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
God bless.
Okay. Yeah, having trouble with the feed apparently there, Phil. Anyway, Pat, we're back up here. We just took a phone call there. I don't know where you left off. You go and take off where you want to go.
Oh my. Leave me.
Well, we got lots more. I mean, we get in a lot more about deception as far as the false flag attacks, and we know about, of course, all of them were instigated by our own government. You know that for a fact, don't you?
Yeah. You were talking a while ago about your own deception as a young man and being coerced into and catching the red, white, and blue fever. I want to tell you a personal story. and because I know you have known many people like this, as I have. My dad was a man who hit his knees every night. He was an elder in the Presbyterian church when I was growing up there. Never uttered a curse word. Never tasted whiskey in his life. I mean, there wasn't a more devout Christian man that I've ever known. I mean, sometimes to a fault, you know, in his son's opinion, me and my brothers. But at age 50, because of a family tradition, his brother was a 33rd degree Mason. His uncle, his favorite uncle, who I mentioned in my books, who was one of Randolph Hearst's right-hand man in the city of Chicago. He was the editor and publisher of the Chicago Daily American, the Evening American, I think they called it then. And he was a Mason. I have his 1915 gavel that I inherited from showing him being the 33rd degree Mason and some Masonic gavel that he had used. And I don't know where it's buried in a drawer around here somewhere, but I did inherit it. But anyway, so my dad, in 1962, at age 50...
Pat, hang on 1 second, please. Hang on 1 second. Hello?
Hey, Bart, the video feed's down about 2.5 minutes now.
Okay.
It's on. It says it's coming on out here.
It's shown here, so I don't know. Okay, thanks, Mike.
It says perfect streaming.
Okay, it says everybody's watching this, but it says we have a perfect stream going out, so I have no idea what's going on. But Pat, you were saying go ahead about your uncle.
So in 1962, my dad joined the Masons at age 50. And of course, I was 22 at the time, so I didn't know anything about that. By the time I was in my 40s, though, and beginning to get a little educated, I began to realize the satanic movement that the Masonic was, and I tried to educate him. We had a couple of shouting matches when he was in his 70s and me in my 40s or 50s, because he was so blinded. I knew stuff that I wasn't supposed to know because it's a secret organization.
Sure.
Well, Jesus Christ said you don't belong in any secret organizations. And now why doesn't my dad know this? I don't know, but he didn't. And I finally talked him out of it. He lived to be 82, and so the last 10 years of his life, he quit going to meetings. I don't know if he really believed that it was something satanic or what, but at least he paid enough attention to me to stop supporting Masonry. You know, they bleed those guys too for a lot of money. And I read one time less than 2% of your donations that go to the Shriners actually go to the hospitals. I don't know if that's how accurate. I believe it. But anyhow, my point in the example here is if they could deceive my dad, then I think they can get anybody else, including the preachers. In fact, he even went and talked to one of his preacher friends down there in Florida at the time when I was challenging him and presenting him with some of the truths. And he went and talked to his preacher, and his preacher even said, "Oh no, I don't see that there's anything unchristian about being a Mason." So what do you do?
But that's because they're ignorant. They don't know. It doesn't take much study to figure that out. My dad was a Mason for a while. He became a 3rd degree and he realized what was going on to get out of it. But it doesn't take a lot of studying. But Pat, most people won't take time to look at it. They won't believe what they want to believe. It's just like learning Scripture. The article I just wrote, they have a surface knowledge, but they won't study. They won't get into any depth. They won't use the Strong's Concordance, or they won't use a 1820 dictionary to learn what the words mean. They just have a surface knowledge of this and what the church says. They have church doctrine. So they're brainwashed to believe it's okay, like we were the red, white, and blue fever. We really thought we were the good guys always, can do no wrong. That's how Satan controls people. It's called a snare, but we walked right into it.
Yep. Well, there are many good Christian men are being snared into Masonry. There's no doubt about that.
They truly are.
But, I saved one. About 30 years ago, when I first began to learn this back in the 80s, I guess it was, nearly 40 years ago now. But I had a good friend who was a good patriot. He was in our Club 110. That's from Article 1, Section 10. We had the Patriots group here, and he was a Mason, and he was kind of proud of it. And then I just gradually began to tell him and let him read a few things. But the difference was his mind was open. Mm-hmm. And he for that reason, his Christianity quickly overcame his deception, and he quit. Amen. He resigned.
Amen. Well, I've had family members who passed away that and we're 33rd degree Masons. They won the Masonic funeral, and everybody proclaimed what good Christian men they were. And I'm not questioning their salvation necessarily, but I am questioning their knowledge of scriptures and what was going on. It's to me, to go to the level of 33rd degree Mason, you have to know what's going on in that organization. They reveal things to you at different steps, and I've studied the steps. And even morals and dogma tells you who they worship very clearly. It's not like it's hidden to them. So to go to a 33rd degree Mason level and say you're a born again believer, I think you're lying to us.
Well, one of them's a lie.
That's exactly right.
You can't be both.
Cannot serve two masters.
So that's part of the deception again. Another deception going on. But with what we see happening right now in 2019. We know now Trump's shown his true colors, and we know people elected him, I guess, in what we call a landslide. I don't think it's great, whatever. But said it was, but he got elected office on Make America Great Again topics, and even before the election, I voted independent the last 3 elections for president. I will not vote main party any longer. But I tried to warn the people to be cautious. He's saying these things. But how many times, I'm 70 years old, how many times during elections have I heard people say this, we're going to do this and do this and do this, as you mentioned a minute ago, they get to D.C. or the state capitol, and all of a sudden you don't hear from them anymore. No. Something happens to them. And Trump said this and said that, and he may have meant it at the time. But Trump certainly has turned his back upon the people. Now he's bringing up gun control. He's the one who brought the red flag laws, you know that. He said take the guns first and then do the courts later. He's turned against the anti-murder people as a whole. He's supported Planned Parenthood. He's turned his back on a lot of things he said he's going to do, or at least try to change. He may be compromised, I don't know. But how many times and how many generations are we going to be deceived, Pat? I mean, when will the people ever see that we're being played for fools?
Well, let us remember, I think we're being played lesser for fools today than in the past. Let us remember that Trump's walking a tightrope, and he's got a gun to his head, and for him to be able to do what he has done to accomplish, it's really amazing, because I don't disagree with you. But you see, the president is not the leader of the country, and you know that. Most Americans don't.
No,
and
not.
So, but the president is controlled, and the people, the higher up, the money boys, the guys that do have those guns to his head, we can't vote for. So why should we bother voting at all? We're voting for a puppet.
Well, we are voting for puppet. I totally agree. But he has a platform. He has a podium, so to speak, where he can at least speak his mind if you have the guts to do it, no matter what the cost. You see, this is where we failed. That's where I failed, because we're afraid to speak the truth because it may cost us something. We've lost our nation. The pulpits don't preach the Bible, the whole counsel of the Word of God. The legislatures don't get up and talk about the Constitution and what's right and wrong. They'll tell you right to their face that they no longer follow the Constitution, although they hold up the right hand, take an oath to uphold it. Mm-hmm. So I said we the people, but me, because I don't want to cause friction in the family, or I don't want to lose my job, or what it may be, I'm afraid to speak the truth. If we had a man in the office who at least tell the truth, no matter what the cost, he'd probably be taken out. But which is more important, Pat? Your temporal provisions or your eternal salvation?
Well, that's obvious. What has Trump been lying about of recent?
Well, he's now come out. He was solidly pro-gun, but now he's come out for the red flag laws in the states. Take the guns first. Somebody turns you in. You might be a bad guy. They come get your guns, and then they do the court stuff later. He's the one who brought that up 8 months ago. Said let's go in and take the guns first. So he started this red flag law with that one statement, and he's been funding Planned Parenthood. And I've got records that show this, that the pro-life people are upset because he's giving money to Planned Parenthood behind the scenes, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So all this is going on. A lot more than that. He also, even Alex Jones turned against him. Alex Jones was a great trumpeter, I called him, for a long time. Trump's turned his back on. He said, I will not allow them to take your type of programming off Google and other media, social media, but they've been cutting them off right and left, and Trump said, I'm not going to get involved. He's backed off on that. So I don't know if it's because he can't help it or because he's got too much to lose, or I don't know what it is. But he's turned his back on a lot of things he said he's going to try to do. And you know, and I know that talk is cheap. And he's backed down on some things that they should have stood with. So I'm not. People say he's better than Hillary. That's not the issue now. Hillary's not president. He is. So this is where we are. And again, before the election come, I told people this. He may come in saying these things, but within a year or two, it's going to be going away, and it is. I'm not a prophet, but I'm not a fool either.
Now, well, let me tell you some more about some of their tactics, and we learned these once again in Oklahoma City nearly a quarter century ago. But for instance, Representative Charles Key, that we got to establish the second grand jury, found out that the district attorney, Bob Macy, after Charles Key, to his credit, got 13,000 signatures at our urging to get a county grand jury established there in Oklahoma City, to outside of the auspices of the FBI, to do a proper investigation.
Yes.
And so he got that done the following year, but he found out quickly, and to his dismay, that it wasn't doing him any good because Bob Macy was nothing but a federal lackey. You know, they had him leading him around by the nose. So that got nowhere. But then of course the first deception was the American ammonium nitrate fuel oil bomb that was non-existent, but that became the brainwashing of America, and most still believe that Tim McVeigh drove that up in a truck and blew up the building from the outside. By the way, one of the employees from the Journal Record building, which was right across the street from Murrah, with a truck bomb parked in between them, the truck bomb goes off, according to official dome, and blows into the nursery, and the nursery, there was a doll and a child's toy that blew out across the street into his third floor window in the Journal Record building. Now, does that tell you that the American was followed for a lie, or there were the bombs inside the building? But anyway, so another one that caught on that the FBI tried to sell us was the busted sting operation. They really knew about this. They were tracking McVeigh all the way down from Kansas and down the interstate all night long. And he's supposed to have been there at 3 in the morning, and they were out there waiting for him. He didn't get there at 4 or 5 or 6. And so it was, you know, we thought we had him, but we busted sting operation. Well, another bunch of baloney, of course. But Charles Key, I'd say it was about 98 or 99. He and my good friend Hoppy Heidelberg, who was the grand juror who got kicked off, and so the old-timers will remember his name, but they were riding together to do a speaking engagement. They were still speaking out, you know, against the cover-up, and they were going to Dallas, and it was a 2 or 3 hour drive down there, and Hoppy asked him in the car, he said, "Charles, how come on video lately and on radio interviews I hear you talking about this busted sting operation?" He says, "You know dang well it wasn't any busted sting operation. The government planted the bombs inside the building, probably some kind of black ops operation. But the building was blown from the inside out. Why are you doing that? Why are you parroting for the government?" Charles kind of paused a moment and looked at him, and he said, "They told me if I didn't back off, I'd start seeing my kids' pictures on the milk cartons."
Then the same thing happened to who was the run for president? Feel that they affected his family. Perot. Didn't the same thing happen to Perot? Your family may be affected.
Oh yeah. Well, in fact, something about a wedding, wasn't it? With all Perot's daughter.
Yeah, they said things could happen. But
they scared the poop out of him. Yeah,
they did. So. And we got about 10 minutes left, so I want to say one thing. I'm going to turn you loose on another topic that I'm sure is going to bring a lot of people.
May I give you one more tactic?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll free. But the following year, Hoppy Heidelberg we had become close friends, and he had invited me to stay at his house every time I came back to Oklahoma City. I was one of the few newsmen that he would trust. And when I took him up on it in about February of '96, and we had a lot of late night discussions, and he told me something he had never told anybody else. But he said after I got kicked off the grand jury in October, I began to make a lot of noise because they told me the judge threatened me with contempt and jail if I talked about anything that went on in the grand jury room. And so he would tell me on a radio interview, and others said, I can't talk about what went on, but I can tell you everything that did not go on, which of course accomplished his mission. And so he began to speak out on radio. And in January, he got a phone call from a lawyer in downtown Oklahoma City and said, Mr. Heidelberg, I have a message for you, but I want to deliver it personally. I need to tell you personally and privately. And Hoppy said, come on out. He gave him directions out to his ranch. And an hour or two later, the guy was there knocking on the door. Hoppy invited him in, and he said, no, I don't think I want to come in. He was obviously worried about a recorder or maybe family members overhearing the conversation. He said, please step out here, let me talk to you in the driveway. And so he did so, and they walked out, and the lawyer turned to him and he said, they told me to tell you that if you don't sue, they'll let you live. And he was in his truck and gone. Now, the lawyer didn't worry about a lawsuit because too much information could come out, including General Parton and his investigation on the bombing on the inside. I mean, with a civil lawsuit, it would have destroyed their whole big lie. And so that's the message they sent. That's the way they behave. Christian Americans cannot understand or appreciate or grasp that.
No, they can't. No, they can't. And by the way, is Charles Key still around anywhere?
Well, and yes, in 95, when we began to try to coerce him into getting the grand jury done, the last thing I said to him when we left at 5 o'clock that afternoon, it was a long lunch, and I said, Charles, we hope you'll come along with us, and I can promise you one or two things if you'll get this grand jury established. You're either going to become governor or you're going to lose your seat. And the following year, he lost his seat. Even Governor Keating, the Republican governor of the same party, came out against him. He did get it back, and I think the very next term, in 98, he got it back, and I believe he's still there. I believe he's still seated.
I need to get home again sometime. You know, we're talking about the bombing in Oklahoma City. We got about 7 minutes left. Right after that, I've been before the FBI 3 times or 4 times being interviewed, and before a federal grand jury once in Clarksville, West Virginia, on some different topics. And but I met with 2 FBI agents in a little town called Summersville, and myself and a couple of people met with me, witnesses on my part. And as you said, they tried to make us believe the fertilizer did that. And I worked at the time. I called on strip jobs and coal mines, and they used ammonium nitrate to blast at the strip job, whatever. And they had heard that I was storing up fertilizer. And it was kind of funny, and not so funny as being interviewed, just funny the statements. I said, it's awful hard to haul a lot of fertilizer in the back of a little Dodge Colt wagon. But anyway, it blew over and it went away. But a few years later, one of the FBI agents, I won't mention his name, I don't want to get the guy in trouble, he may still be working, come to see me personally and said, you know what you told me back then is come to pass? Now this is a fact. He come to see me later, and he said that what you told me is come to pass. He said, everything you told me is coming to pass. And so he said, I want out of this, whatever he said it was, system or whatever it was. So even some of the insiders are seeing what's happening now. In the last couple of minutes, I read already the 10 Communist Manifesto, the platforms of it. How closely do those relate to the protocols of Zion?
It's all happening right now. You know, the Zionists want to deny, and they call it a forgery. Well, if that's a forgery, there's got to be an original somewhere. But without even trying to put the blame on who wrote it, is it happening or not? It's going on.
It is.
That's the big thing.
It is. And the Communist Manifesto and their protocols go hand in hand because whoever it is, the same people are backing both of them, are they not?
Oh yeah, and of course, there are several other books. You know, the 13th Tribe. I bet you've read that, and so many other things that expose it. But it's Satan's chosen people who have control of the publishing industry, including the newspapers and the TVs and the books, most of them. So how can we expect the millennials to learn anything of truth anymore?
Well, we hadn't had any education, probably in our lifetime, really, about the truth of history, because whoever wins a war gets to rewrite history. You know that.
That's
so we probably haven't had any history in this country that you can count on, at least since 1800s.
First casualty is truth.
Absolutely, always. We're down about 4 minutes, Pat, and I want you to take about a minute or two and wrap up what's on your mind before we let you go.
Oh golly, I don't have anything in particular on my mind. Just the big picture, the giant conspiracy, and I think the enemy has done a great job in deluding such as we by calling us conspiracy theorists. I've never been a theorist. I don't even write about anything that's a theory. I write about conspiracy facts.
There you go.
And that's, of course, what we saw in Oklahoma. That's what we see today already. Almost 20 years, we're finally seeing 911 become somewhat exposed. But once again, it's suppressed. You can't get the mainstream media to talk anything about it. Once again, call Limbaugh, Hannity, and bring up 911 and see how fast you get shut down.
Well, you know, go ahead.
I'm just going to say it's one of the biggest crimes that they have gotten away with. They cannot afford to talk about. And like the JFK assassination, we solved that. Not we personally, but I mean we as a group and writers and private investigators and others. That's been solved for 30 years or more. We know the truth happened there, but they can still never admit it. It's going to be the same with 911, and it certainly will be the same with Obama's birth certificate. That's the biggest atrocity, probably maybe the biggest crime in American history.
Well, now you know we just had a shooting over New Zealand, I guess, yesterday or whatever it was, and they've already pointed fingers at the problem. The problem is white nationalists. You know that, right?
Is what?
White nationalists.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I mean, it's our fault because
Nazis.
Yeah, we're Nazis because we believe that white people are okay, and we believe that our nation one time was a Christian nation, and we should abide by the laws of God's book and the contract with the government called the Constitution. We believe we should abide by those. So we're now white nationalists, so we're bad people. And especially Christian white nationalists who have preached the Bible above everything else, including the Constitution and Bill of Rights. We are now the bad guys, are we not?
Yep, that's right, but because we don't control the media.
There you go. Exactly right. Well, we're out of time, Pat. I want to thank you so much for taking time to join us again. I always enjoy talking to you. Sometime you got to come and see us and sit down in the studio with us and do another one sometime in the future.
I would like that. I would enjoy that. And you got my new book on hand. I'm anxious for you to read that.
Yep.
I'd like for you to know my experiences with the feds, my personal experiences, and my attorney of choice, Jesus Christ, and we kicked them in the U.S. federal court, me and Jesus.
Well, you know, I got that where you keep my book. I got in the bathroom for my reading material, so it's in there. So I'm reading it.
Study room.
But I want to thank you so much, Pat. You come and see us sometime. We may even buy you a hamburger or something. How's that?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, brother. Talk to you soon.
Righto. Thanks again. I enjoyed being with you.
All right. Bye-bye. I'll be back here again, Lord willing, on the first Saturday of April. I don't know the date of that, but that's when we plan on being back here again for another Bible study and current events. All I can say in closing is this. Let's endeavor to keep our eyes more centered on Christ, His Word, and truth. And let's walk in the love that He said to walk in. And let's speak the truth in love, but let's speak the truth firmly, with conviction, and not be afraid to stand for His Word. Let's do that as believers, okay? Let's stand together in Jesus' name. See you next time.